Hello everyone, this is Jerry. For those tuning in, I'm a 39-year-old autistic adult who sometimes does autism advocacy videos. Now, we're gearing toward the end of Autism Awareness Month, and due to controversy once again striking the autism community, my planned video for it's going to be somewhat different than originally planned, but also somewhat similar. Before I begin, I completed the script for this video before news broke yesterday that RFK Jr. plans to create a Federal Registry of Autistic People, which admittedly frightens me a bit because I don't like the government having that much power. But since that warrants a video just on its own, the rest of this video will not pertain to that. The controversy, aside from that, what I mentioned this time is RFK Jr.'s autism press conference that he did last week. Depending on who you ask, it was either one of the best autism speeches ever or an ableist polemic. But I frankly don't see it in either polarized way, and I'll explain why. But first, I'm going to offer some context because it seems like both extremes have little understanding of why the other feels the way they do. Many parents and loved ones and caregivers of high support needs autistic people who represent the most severe cases enthusiastically support the speech because they feel their concerns and the struggle of said high support needs autistic person in their life have been heard for the first time in a long time, or perhaps the first time even ever. As I've said in my prior videos criticizing neurodiversity theory and other aspects of it, which can be seen in the description of this video, they're justifiably angry because they've been talked over by not all but some lower support needs autistic people who may not be able to relate to their concerns because their own needs and experiences are completely different. As I've explained in my last two autism advocacy videos, not all, but some in the opposition to neurodiversity theory have taken this anger and mishandled it by scapegoating lower support needs autistic people like myself and talking over us. In large part because of this anger, many of these parents and caregivers have said, "It's not about you," in response to the criticisms of RFK Jr.'s press conference, which has gone as poorly as online discourse as you could imagine. Some have resorted to straw man arguments such as, "Why would you not want the causes of autism to be found?" Or "Why don't you want a cure for something so devastating?" To be fair, these are reasonable questions to ask to the neurodiversity supporters who have expressed falsehoods like it's not a disability, it's just a difference, or sentiments opposing all or most therapies and interventions because they are supposedly inhumane or other such nonsense. But not every critic of RFK Jr.'s speech believes in these delusions. For that, and because I have addressed these bad faith arguments already in so many prior videos, I will for the most part not be discussing them further. Lower support needs autistic people, or more specifically, the reasonable ones, don't take issue with RFK Jr. acknowledging the severe cases, but are concerned that he's not adequately distinguished us from the severe cases. This is because people commonly underestimate how much autism impacts the milder cases as well, with lower support needs autistic people even underestimating how much it even affects us. I mean, the geeky, high IQ, socially awkward tech bro stereotype is just that, a stereotype. One that applies to a very small number of even lower supports needs autistic people. It has a kernel of truth to it, but the actual picture is far more complicated. Now, to be fair, Kennedy has explained toward the beginning of the press conference that 25% of autism cases exhibit the severe symptoms which result in them not being able to, as he put it, play baseball, pay taxes, get a date, and some even go to the toilet by themselves. Though I watched the entire press conference, which is linked in the description, I didn't catch that until someone pointed it out, because to be honest with you, it's often difficult to understand exactly what RFK Jr. is saying. It's not his fault. The reason for this is because he has a rare neurological disorder called spasmodic dysphonia, which makes speaking more difficult, but still. As a longtime lawyer from a major political dynasty, he should know that clarity is something that's important in politics. And what you say matters, but oftentimes what people hear is just as important, if not more so. Some have taken issue with RFK Jr.'s stance on environmental causes of autism, or simply don't like him because he's part of the Trump administration. Many, but not all, who express this are neurodiversity theorists, though most seem to believe that espousing what they see as conspiracy theories is meant to stigmatize autistic people. I've never agreed with this. RFK Jr. is correct that environmental factors are a major cause of the rise in autism cases, but genetics also plays a major role, as numerous studies indicate. And his claim that better diagnostic criteria has nothing to do with this is incorrect. When I was diagnosed, there was no autism spectrum, or more accurately, there was, but it simply wasn't recognized. It's been less than a decade by that point that the medical community finally realized that autism was not a form of childhood schizophrenia. With the with my diagnosis and the release of the DSM-3, while I was diagnosed young, many my age and older fell through the cracks because their symptoms didn't present in a way that was commonly understood at the time. They may have been less severe in many of these situations, of course, but would often suffer for many years not knowing what was going on with them and not be officially diagnosed until adulthood, and thus missing out on early intervention and other therapies which may have helped them better integrate. Now, we've gotten far better at integrating autistic children and adolescents into the society. The CURE study I mentioned in a prior video didn't surprise me, as it did many others, because it bore many similarities to my own personal experience. I went from a toddler who underwent severe regression in linguistic skills, severe stereotypical behaviors, some of which RFK Jr. directly mentioned in his press conference, to an intelligent child who was beginning to catch up to his peers academically and starting to make friends, to a troubled teenager with anger and aggression issues, who struggled with socialization yet still had a handful of close friendships and was on the honor roll, to an adult who has accomplished a great deal yet is still struggling with work-life balance, dealing with the negative consequences of high masking, as I explained in another video linked in the description, and dealing with what I only learned a few years ago as autistic burnout, which I also briefly touched upon in that same video. During each phase of life, I dealt with discrimination. In my younger years, most of it was blatant, such as being referred to as the R word. But during my teen years, it started to take a more subtle turn. Bullies would take advantage of my reduced capacity of understanding social cues to emotionally manipulate me. This is one of the main reasons why the backstabbing I mentioned in my last video was so devastating to me. It brought back so many bad memories. In the adult world, where you would think people would mature and grow out of this, I learned the hard way that many not only haven't, but those in positions of authority especially, have honed their ability to gaslight and exploit the power of their positions of trust to manipulate others. It is this discrimination that I'm seeing reflected in the raging dumpster fire in the broader autism community today, with the ever worsening culture war, with the polarized reactions to this press conference further proving what I said in most of my recent videos. To the parents and caregivers of severely autistic people, you've been ignored and marginalized for far too long. But just because others have talked over you does not give you the right to talk over lower supports needs autistic people and our loved ones. This isn't a zero-sum game where one side of the spectrum must be ignored for the other to thrive, or at least be recognized. Autism is a spectrum. That is not my opinion, that's a proven fact. I agree that more clarity is needed in the diagnostic criteria, but I do not support going backwards. To lower support needs autistic people, many of you have let partisan identitarian politics cloud your judgment, and the steps backward I mentioned are in large part the result of this toxic trend. You need to remember that not all autistic people are as fortunate as us, and that many of us started our autism journey with far more severe impairments in the past than we have currently. I'm an example of this. And that some of our brothers and sisters will improve very little, if at all, given what is currently understood. For many of those, a potential cure would be a blessing. Insisting that looking for a cure or therapies are some kind of conspiracy to commit genocide against autistic people is paranoid lunacy that has no place in this conversation. I understand human rights abuses occurred against autistic people in the past, and perhaps some in the present in the name of helping them, but not every current or potential therapy is the same as those practices. As we end another Autism Awareness Month, and before I end this video, I'd like to leave you with a final point. I've seen things change a great deal over the years, a lot of good but some bad, but one old debate that's still brewing is between autism awareness and autism acceptance. I've long fought for autism awareness because, as I've explained in this and so many other videos, very little was known about it in the past, And I've explained in more recent videos the knowledge of the public has improved but is still lacking. Autism acceptance has been commonly defined in neurodiversity theory as accepting autism as a natural variation in neurology. I find this to be a highly privileged, counterfactual position because it ignores the more severe cases and downplays the struggles of lower functioning autistic people as well, albeit to a lesser degree. To those who support so-called autism acceptance, are correct that discrimination is a problem and that improving this will help improve outcomes for autistic people by reducing the trauma many go through, and that there are in fact some positive autistic traits. These positive traits, however, are not present in every autistic person and often come with steep costs. My own hypothesis is that many of these traits, such as the ability to hyperfocus, above average pattern recognition, and above average IQ, we have seen in some autistic people, particularly higher on the spectrum, are the brain's attempt to make up for deficits in other areas. Speaking from personal experience, as someone who has all of the traits I just mentioned, they admittedly come in handy. But I also struggle still with sensory issues, albeit not nearly as much when I was younger, struggle with multitasking, find it more difficult to focus and achieve desirable results in tasks I find boring and pointless, and can get a sort of tunnel vision with hyperfocus, which can make task switching far more difficult. We do need a form of autism acceptance, of course, not so much of autism as a natural variation, but of autistic people themselves as human beings deserving of dignity regardless of where on the spectrum they land. Autism awareness is an important part of this because there are many people who are ignorant not because they want to be, but because they know very little about a complicated neurodevelopmental condition. I was a toddler when I was diagnosed and had interacted with many other autistic people on different sides of the spectrum for many years, yet I'm still learning things about autism constantly. The adult autism issues I mentioned in recent videos, such as autistic burnout, struggles with social camouflage, or masking as is most commonly called, and others, I haven't mentioned, such as monotropism and things I mentioned in other videos, but not here, such as double empathy problem, are things I just barely learned about a few short years ago. But learning about them has helped me make sense of so much of what I've gone through as an autistic adult. Because of this and other factors, I no longer see autism awareness as something just for the general public, but something for autistic people and their loved ones to help make sense of what we're going through and to better empathize with the struggles of autistic people on the other end of the spectrum. The autism community, as I've said before, is a dumpster fire. People in both extremes of this ideological blood sport are terrified. Terrified that if they're given an inch, that they'll be erased. In truth, the autism community itself, as a broader community, is a collection of diverse communities with vastly different concerns and needs. Some have criticized this, saying that the spectrum has become too broad. But I say that we need to respect our differences while allowing the subcommunities to be able to express their own unique concerns. It doesn't have to be this way. This tragedy was entirely preventable and can be fixed. In a video in the near future, I will explain my own suggestions for how to fix this. Until then, I'll see you later.